Hey guys, tonight we wander back, way back, to a time when Rome is nothing more than a smudge on the map. Just a cluster of huts and campfires sitting on a few hills. The air smells like wood smoke, and the people around you don't even call themselves Romans yet. They're just tribes surviving day to day. And here's the kicker. If you were actually dropped here in the 8th century BCE, you probably wouldn't survive the first week. Not because of some dramatic sword fight or wild beasts, but because the drinking water is disgusting and there's no pizza delivery. Tragic, right? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love it if you commented your location and the local time down below. I get a kick out of seeing where and when people are listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand in the middle of a marshy plain, where 7 small hills rise up like knuckles pressing through the earth. It's not the Rome of marble and emperors yet. It's mud huts with straw roofs, smoke curling lazily from holes cut in the thatch. Chickens run underfoot, and kids chase dogs barefoot through the dirt. It feels more village than city, and in fact, that's exactly what it is, a village perched by the Tiber River. If you squint, you can already see how the river is the lifeline, winding like a blue ribbon through the rough landscape. Trade trickles along it, fishermen cast their nets, and the future, though nobody here knows it, is already flowing. You wander closer to one of the huts. The walls are made of wattle and daub, sticks jammed together and smeared with mud like some kind of oversized kindergarten project. Inside, the smell of smoke and goat lingers. A family crouches around a clay pot bubbling with grains and herbs. No spaghetti, no tomato sauce, those won't exist for millennia, just mush. And maybe a sliver of goat if they're lucky tonight. Odd detail. Instead of furniture, the family sprawls on animal skins spread across the floor. Beds as we know them? Forget it. You'd be lying on straw, scratching all night. But at least the fire in the center glows warm, crackling as sparks leap upward through the thatch hole. Here's your first mainstream historical fact. Archaeologists believe Rome began around 753 BCE, when several Latin-speaking tribes merged their hilltop villages. These weren't mighty palaces, just clusters of huts. But together, they created something sturdier, safer, and more ambitious. Now, as you stroll toward the edge of the camp, you hear men shouting and the dull thud of wood striking wood. Training. The early Romans, even before they were called Romans, already valued the idea that every man might one day fight. Sticks and round shields clash, and you can almost smell the sweat in the evening air. It's primitive, yes, but it's the seed of something huge, the military culture that will one day dominate the world. Scholars still argue whether the story of Rome's founding, Romulus killing his twin brother Remus over where the walls should be built, is just a myth or has some scrap of truth buried beneath the legend. But standing here, watching these muddy huts glow in the sunset, you realize the legend doesn't even matter. People here are carving out survival. They build ditches, throw up wooden palisades, and guard their river crossing with suspicion. Outsiders are threats. And yet, there's community. In the evening, when the fire pits burn low, voices rise up in chant. Old women tell stories about spirits of the forest, about birds carrying messages from the gods, about lightning striking as a sign of approval or warning. You tilt your head back and look at the night sky. It's littered with stars, brighter than you've ever seen in modern life. No neon, no car horns, just crickets buzzing and the occasional bark of a dog. You wander down by the Tiber River, its dark water reflecting the starlight. A ferry, just a creaky raft, is pulled across by rope. On the far bank, other tribes live, sometimes friendly, often hostile. You can sense the tension in the air. One misstep, and tomorrow there could be spears thrown across this very crossing. Another quirky detail. At this stage, Rome isn't even Rome. To outsiders, it's just a marshy settlement in mosquito country. Some neighboring tribes joke about the smell. Others call it insignificant. You, standing here centuries later, know they couldn't be more wrong. The campfire smoke curls into the night. Children drift asleep on straw mats. You hear a baby cry, quickly hushed by a lullaby sung in a language that feels ancient and earthy. Somewhere out in the darkness, a wolf howls. And maybe, just maybe, the villagers imagine that howl belongs to the legendary she-wolf that once suckled their founders. Myth and reality blend, as they always do in Rome. You settle down by the fire yourself, your body warm, eyelids heavy, mind turning slow. In the dirt and smoke and noise of this tiny village, you sense something brewing. An empire doesn't look like an empire at first. It looks like survival. You wake with the sun creeping over the ridge of the hills, spilling gold across the huts. Smoke curls upward as the first fires are lit. Chickens scatter in all directions. Today feels different. The chatter has a nervous edge, like everyone is waiting for a story to unfold. And that story, whispered from elder to child, is about kings. Not just men in fur cloaks, but rulers with strange destinies written in omens, storms, and sometimes blood. The first one you hear about is Romulus. He's the survivor, the brother who, according to legend, drew a line in the dirt and refused to let anyone cross it. Remus did, and, well, that was the end of Remus. Brutal sibling rivalry doesn't exactly scream bedtime story, but here you are, with villagers swearing that's how Rome began, on one man's anger and ambition. Odd detail, Romulus is said to have hand-picked his men by offering sanctuary to outlaws, fugitives, and anyone desperate enough to follow him. Basically, Rome starts as a ragtag gang of misfits. You can imagine the awkward dinner conversations. One guy's a runaway slave, another is wanted in his hometown for theft, and somehow they're supposed to share a stew pot. Yet, out of this chaos, unity takes shape. Mainstream historical fact. The earliest rulers of Rome, before the Republic, were indeed kings, 7 of them in traditional accounts. They weren't emperors yet, but their reigns laid down customs, religious rituals, and legal precedents that echoed for centuries. As you wander the dirt paths, villagers point toward the Capitoline Hill. Up there, a small temple takes shape, crude but purposeful. Offerings are left, grain, wine, the occasional animal, meant for the gods who supposedly meddle in every decision. Priests wave branches, chanting to Jupiter or Mars, hoping for rain or victory. Religion here isn't just belief, it's the operating system of the whole society. Every action requires divine approval. Then comes Numa Pompilius, the second king. In contrast to Romulus's blood and thunder, Numa is the wise old man archetype. You see him in your mind's eye, beard flowing, calmly teaching the people rituals, calendars, and laws. He's credited with introducing the office of Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest. Imagine that, a king who spends less time swinging swords and more time adjusting festival dates. Scholars still argue whether Numa even existed or if he's a convenient placeholder for Rome's early religious institutions. Either way, the villagers tell his story as if he sat right here, under the oak tree, humming prayers. As twilight falls again, you overhear another tale of Tullus Hostilius, the warlike third king. He's not about festivals, he's about battles. He allegedly orders the destruction of Alba Longa, a neighboring city, and folds its people into Rome. If Romulus gave the city blood, Numa gave it spirit, Tullus gives it teeth. The villagers lean forward in the firelight as they describe duels between champions, swords clashing while the crowd screams. Another quirky detail, the story of the Horatii and the Curiati. Two sets of triplet brothers fight on behalf of Rome and Alba Longa, like some brutal sports match. One by one they fall, until only a single Roman remains, wounded but alive, staggering to victory. It's absurd, theatrical, and exactly the kind of legend that sticks in memory. Next, Ancus Marcius arrives in the tale, building bridges and founding Ostia, Rome's first port. Suddenly, Rome isn't just mud huts anymore. It has trade flowing, salt pans working, and a river mouth buzzing with possibility. You stand there picturing ships bobbing on the Tiber, ropes creaking, merchants shouting in dialects you don't understand. But power attracts outsiders. The villagers speak of Tarquinius Priscus, an Etruscan who supposedly tricked his way to kingship. You can almost see the Etruscans, fancy neighbors to the north, swaggering in with their purple robes and ornate augury rituals. Rome absorbs their culture like a sponge. The fasces, bundles of rods symbolizing power, gladiatorial games, and even sewer construction. Civilization is seeping in. The sixth king, Servius Tullius, rises from humble beginnings, rumored to be born of a slave, marked by a mystical flame glowing around his head as a child. He reorganizes citizens into classes, building the backbone of Roman politics. You picture charts drawn in the dirt, wealthy landowners here, poorer farmers there, soldiers expected from each group. Rome is learning hierarchy, and it's not shy about enforcing it. Finally, you hear the darkest tale, Tarquinius Superbus, the proud. Arrogant, ruthless, he rules not by respect, but by fear. His downfall is sparked by an infamous crime, his son's assault of Lucretia, a noble woman whose tragic end ignites outrage. The villagers hush their voices here, eyes lowered to the fire. This story doesn't feel like myth. It feels raw, almost too human. And with that outrage, the kingship itself collapses. You sense the shift, the air vibrating with rebellion. No more kings, the people cry. They want something new, something shared, a republic. The night grows quiet again, crickets hum, smoke drifts skyward, and you lean back against the rough earth, realizing you've just wandered through centuries in the space of one evening. From Romulus's hut to the fall of a tyrant, Rome is already changing shape before your eyes.
The fire is ash now, embers glowing faintly red, and yet the air thrums with the energy of something new. No kings, no crowns, just citizens trying to govern themselves. You wander through the streets, or what barely pass for streets, feeling the uncertainty and pride buzzing like static. The Romans have thrown off monarchy, and with that single act, they've stepped into a new experiment, the Republic. It doesn't look polished. There are no marble courthouses or soaring columns yet. Instead, there are rough wooden benches, groups of men shouting, and a handful of elders trying to keep things from dissolving into chaos. You can almost taste the rawness of it, like dough that hasn't risen yet. The idea is simple. 2 consuls, elected each year, who share power so no one man can become king again. But of course, you see the flaw. What happens when they disagree? Spoiler, they will. Often. Mainstream historical fact. The Roman Republic officially begins in 509 BCE, and its balance of power between consuls, the Senate, and the citizen assemblies becomes one of the most influential political systems in history. Even centuries later, founding fathers of modern nations will crib ideas from this messy, argumentative little city. As you stroll across the forum, you notice men arguing not about philosophy, but about fields, water rights, and neighboring tribes. The Republic has enemies from the moment it's born. To the north,
The Etruscans glare, furious at losing control over their rebellious city. To the south, the Latin tribes mutter about Rome's arrogance. Every direction you look, someone wants to test this newborn experiment. And so soldiers gather. They're not professionals, not yet. They're farmers with spears, called to fight for a season and then return to plow their fields. The ground crunches under their sandals as they practice maneuvers, shields locking together into a crude but effective wall. You hear the clang of bronze on bronze, the shouted cadence of commands. Odd detail: these early Roman legions don't march with the rigid perfection you picture from movies. They stumble, they sweat, they swear, but each campaign teaches them something sharper. Scholars still argue whether the Republic's early victories against the Etruscans and Latin League were truly decisive or later exaggerated to make Rome's rise look inevitable. What you do see is a stubborn determination. Lose today, fight again tomorrow, until eventually your enemy is worn down. You wander toward the edge of the city where wooden watchtowers rise. Scouts squint into the distance, watching dust clouds that signal approaching raiders. The Republic is fragile, and everyone knows it. That's why unity matters so desperately. But unity doesn't come easy. Under the surface, tension brews between the wealthy patricians who claim ancestry from the city's founders and the plebeians, the ordinary folk who do the grunt work. The patricians sit in the Senate, draped in simple white togas with purple stripes, puffing themselves up with authority. The plebs, tired of debt and hungry mouths, demand a say. One night you overhear a story about the plebeians threatening to abandon the city entirely, retreating to a hill outside Rome in protest. Imagine it, an entire working class just walking out, leaving the patricians blinking in panic. Without farmers, without soldiers, the Republic collapses. It's essentially an ancient labor strike. And it works. The patricians cave, granting the plebes their own officials, called tribunes, who can veto unjust laws. Odd little scene. You watch one of these tribunes walk through the forum, ordinary clothes, no grand entourage, but the crowd parts respectfully. Touching him is considered almost sacred. His very word can stop a law cold. It's a small victory, but it plants the seed of Roman politics. Constant bargaining, grudging compromise, and occasional shouting matches. The Republic also starts recording its laws, carving them into bronze tablets so everyone can see. No more secret rules whispered among the elite. You run your fingers over the etched lines, rough and uneven, but revolutionary. The 12 tablets, as they'll be known, cover everything from property rights to debt to, oddly enough, where you can bury a body. Nothing glamorous, but it gives ordinary Romans a foothold. And still, the wars keep coming. Etruscan spears clash against Roman shields, Latin allies rebel, only to be subdued and slowly absorbed into Rome's orbit. You watch villages turned into Roman colonies, little outposts spreading like vines across the map. Each one is a foothold, tying new lands to the city with roads, walls, and the ever-present threat of legions returning. Night falls, and you rest by a campfire alongside weary soldiers. They eat stale bread and dried figs, laughing about home and cursing the mud. One scratches a charm into his shield, a crude drawing of a wolf, echoing back to Romulus and Remus. Even here, in the grit of campaign, myth and reality bleed together. The Republic is far from stable. Factions scheme, families feud, and neighboring tribes circle like wolves. But you sense something undeniable. Each battle, each compromise, each dusty march down a rutted road is building muscle memory. Rome isn't just surviving anymore. It's learning how to win. The smell of dust and sweat hits you before the sound. A crowd gathers in the forum, their voices rising and tumbling like waves. This is the heart of the Republic now. Not a palace or a temple, but an open square where politics and gossip intertwine. You step closer and see senators,
old men in crisp togas with purple stripes, perched on benches. Their faces are stern, lined like cracked marble, as they argue about war, taxes, and land. Above them, banners flutter in the breeze, painted with symbols of family pride. Below, plebeians push and strain to catch every word. You hear a man mutter, "They talk too long while we starve," and another snort in agreement. Rome is both a community and a powder keg. Mainstream historical fact. The Roman Senate began as a council of elders under the kings, but during the Republic, it grew into the dominant political body, filled with aristocratic families who wielded immense influence. Though technically advisory, their authority carried enormous weight. You walk the streets branching from the Forum and find yourself in the Sabula, a dense, noisy neighborhood where life feels more human. Children splash in puddles, women hang laundry from ropes strung between handsets, and merchants shout about olives and cheese. It smells like fish, sweat, and smoke. You're far from the neat marble images painted centuries later. This is Rome in its raw adolescence. A soldier brushes past you, shield strapped to his back. His face is sunburned, his sandals caked with mud. He isn't a professional. He's a farmer pressed into service, leaving behind a half-plowed field. Odd detail, most Roman soldiers in this era supply their own weapons. If you're poor, your armor might be a wicker shield and a rusty spear handed down by an uncle. If you're wealthier, you might stride into battle with gleaming bronze. War, like politics, is tiered. You wander into a training field outside the walls. The thud of wood on wood echoes as men slam practice swords against posts. Sweat glistens in the afternoon sun. Their movements are clumsy, yet determined. Every man knows he may be called at any moment, and the Republic depends on their discipline. Scholars still argue whether these early legions were truly innovative or simply borrowed tactics from their neighbors, especially the Etruscans and Samnites. But what you see here is a culture of adaptation. They copy, tweak, and eventually perfect the art of organized violence. Back in the Forum, another scene unfolds. A tribune stands tall, his hand raised to silence the crowd. A senator has proposed a law that would benefit the wealthy, and with a single word, veto, the tribune blocks it. The crowd erupts, cheering, whistling, stamping their feet. This is the plebeians' leverage, their protection from exploitation. For once, the ordinary voice matters. You follow a group of citizens into a small tavern as twilight sets in. Clay cups clink as men drink rough wine, cut with water to make it stretch. The talk is sharp, cynical. "The Senate steals our fields," one says. Another replies, "At least they keep us fed when the granaries are full." The laughter is bitter, but you sense something new. Romans complain about their government the same way you might gripe about traffic. It's a sign of ownership. This republic is theirs, messy and flawed, but theirs. Odd, quirky moment. A drunk man stumbles outside, lifts his tunic, and relieves himself at the base of a temple. Nobody blinks. Public sanitation is a future dream. For now, the city smells like humanity crammed too close. And yet there's pride. You feel it when the soldiers march back through the gates after a skirmish with a neighboring tribe. Dust coats their tunics, but the crowd cheers. Children run alongside, shouting. The soldiers grin even as they limp. Rome may be small, but its people already see themselves as exceptional. At night, you sit by a fountain. The water trickles quietly, a rare calm. A young boy tosses pebbles, pretending they're soldiers crossing rivers. Behind you, an elder tells a group of children stories of Rome's past victories, inflating them until they sound like epics. The children's eyes go wide, and you realize myth-making isn't just for kings, it's for every family, every street corner. Rome is learning to believe in its own legend.
The Republic is no longer fragile like a newborn. It's stubborn, ambitious, and restless. Senators squabble, tribunes veto, soldiers train, and merchants haggle. Every voice feels like part of a larger rhythm. And though you know the Republic will one day choke on its own contradictions, right now, in this glow of torches and chatter, it feels invincible. The sun rises low over the hills, casting long shadows across the dusty training fields where Roman soldiers prepare for yet another campaign. You wander along with them, feeling the tension in the air like static before a storm. Today's lesson comes in the form of war, not a philosophical debate, not a vote in the forum, but the harsh, unyielding reality of conflict. Rome's enemies are formidable: Carthage across the sea, the Samnites in the hills, and occasionally even former allies who suddenly remember old grudges. Odd detail, the Romans often practice marching with weights tied to their arms, as if preparing to lift boulders in battle. You watch a young recruit stumble and fall face first in the dirt. He gets up, wipes the mud from his face, and tries again. Discipline isn't natural. It's forged like the bronze tips of their spears. Mainstream historical fact, the Punic Wars, which will define Rome's early dominance, begin in this era. The rivalry with Carthage is epic in scale, though at first it starts with smaller skirmishes over trade routes and control of strategic ports. You can feel the tension building as Rome stretches beyond the Italian peninsula, testing both its military skill and political patience. You wander toward the Forum again and hear rumors of Hannibal, a brilliant Carthaginian general who one day will cross the Alps with elephants. For now, he's just a story, a shadow on the horizon, but the villagers and soldiers alike whisper his name with a mixture of awe and fear. You can almost see the imagined elephants, trunks swinging, shaking the earth as they march. Scholars still argue whether Hannibal's early victories were luck, genius, or divine intervention. You, watching from the dusty outskirts, don't need certainty, just the feeling that history is waiting to spring itself into motion. Meanwhile, back in the city, the common folk are restless. Grain shortages make the streets smell of sweat and desperation. Plebeians gather in clusters, voices raised in complaint, sometimes in protest. You see them wave their fists at senators lounging on benches. One man shouts, "Feed us or face the wrath of the Republic." Oddly theatrical, you think, but also effective. These everyday disputes shape Rome just as much as victories in battle. The city itself grows as well. Wooden huts give way to stone buildings, clay tiles replace thatch roofs, and roads begin to stretch outward, connecting Rome to neighboring towns. Each brick laid, each road paved, feels like a small victory against the chaos of nature and human conflict. You wander over the stones and imagine the future carts rolling over them, loaded with olive oil, wine, and grain. Another quirky moment. Gladiatorial games emerge in this period. Not yet grand arenas, but small, bloody exhibitions to honor the dead or celebrate a victory. You watch a wooden platform where two men fight with sticks, surrounded by a cheering, restless crowd. The thrill, the blood, the crowd's roar. It's a precursor to the spectacles that will one day define Roman entertainment. In the countryside, soldiers train under strict supervision. You hear commands barked in short, clipped phrases. Stumbling recruits are corrected, sometimes with a shove, sometimes with a harsh word. Each day builds resilience, the kind that will carry the Republic through decades of conflict. You notice the camaraderie forming, boys from different tribes learning to fight together, to rely on each other. The city's politics simmer alongside the wars. Senators debate endlessly, tribunes block overreaching laws, and the plebeians vote when given the chance. Oddly, you realize, Democracy is messy. Disagreement, compromise, and shouting matches become as important to Rome as any victory on the battlefield. Scholars still argue whether the Republic's political system was brilliant or destined for chaos. But standing here, amidst the dust and shouting, you understand that its complexity is part of its strength. As evening falls, the soldiers return, exhausted but triumphant from a minor skirmish against a neighboring tribe. Children follow them home, imitating sword swings and shields. You see a young boy toss a stick in the air, imagining it as a spear thrown against an unseen enemy. Rome is alive with possibility, and every small action, the laying of a stone, the planting of a field, the swing of a sword, feels like it's building towards something monumental. The night grows quiet, and you lean back against a tree. Somewhere in the distance, a bellows coughs, a dog barks, and a mother hushes her child. The Republic is fragile, full of conflict and promise, yet it is unstoppable in its ambition. And you, wandering these dusty streets and muddy training fields, sense that the echoes of these first wars will ripple across centuries, long after the campfires have died.
You wake to the scent of the Mediterranean Sea mixing with dust and sweat. Rome has grown beyond the hills, spreading its influence through Italy, and you wander along roads that are slowly paving the Republic's ambitions into stone. Merchants call out from carts loaded with olive oil, wine, and pottery, their voices blending with the clatter of hooves and the chatter of citizens. You sense the Republic is no longer content with survival. It hungers for expansion. Odd detail. Rome's expansion isn't just about conquest, it's about clever alliances. Tribes and cities are absorbed not only through war, but also through marriage, treaties, and citizenship grants. You see a patrician shaking hands with a local chieftain, the air thick with cautious smiles. Loyalty is bought with gifts, promises, and sometimes fear. Scholars still argue whether Rome's rapid growth relied more on diplomacy or military intimidation. But standing here, you notice the delicate balance at play. Mainstream historical fact. By the 4th century BCE, Rome has begun spreading beyond the Italian peninsula. Campaigns in Greece, Spain, and North Africa will eventually define the Mediterranean's map. Each conquest brings new cultures, languages, and resources under Roman influence, creating a complex mosaic of power and identity. You stroll along a bustling street and hear rumors of Greek philosophers, engineers, and artists whose works are being absorbed into Roman culture. The city is learning quickly, adapting foreign techniques to local needs. Roads, aqueducts, and fortified walls begin to appear, demonstrating Rome's growing mastery over both terrain and people. Back in the Forum, senators debate whether to fund a campaign abroad or focus on domestic issues. Their voices rise and fall like waves. You overhear one say, "Victory is meaningless if the people starve." Another counters, "Only through conquest can Rome secure its future." Oddly, both points feel valid. You realize that politics, like war, is a chessboard with too many moving pieces. In the countryside, legions train with renewed rigor. Young soldiers march with weighted packs, shields glinting under the sun. Some stumble, some fall, but they rise again. Every drill is a rehearsal for the massive battles that will soon sweep across Europe and North Africa. Odd, quirky moment. A soldier's helmet slips over his eyes mid-march, and he continues blindly, tripping over his comrades, drawing laughter and groans alike. Discipline is strict, but humor survives. The Republic also experiments with governance abroad. Cities brought under Roman control are often allowed local rulers, provided they pay tribute and supply troops. You wander past small colony where local children play Roman games, their laughter echoing across the plaza.
Rome's influence spreads not just through armies, but through culture, language, and everyday life. Scholars still argue whether Rome's ability to integrate conquered peoples or its military prowess was more crucial to its expansion. Observing this mix of conquest and accommodation, you sense the genius lies in the combination. The Republic doesn't simply conquer, it absorbs, adapts, and redefines what it touches. In the evening, you watch traders unloading amphoras filled with wine and oil, slaves carrying heavy baskets, and soldiers sharpening their weapons. The city hums with life, a complex network of commerce, governance, and military readiness. Every corner of Rome seems to thrum with purpose, a pulse that will grow stronger with each passing decade. Night descends slowly. You find yourself on a hill overlooking the city, the Tiber winding below like a silver thread. Fires flicker across the streets, tiny stars mirrored on earth. You breathe in the cool night air and realize that Rome's journey from a humble village to a Mediterranean power is just beginning. Every brick laid, every soldier trained, and every alliance forged is a step toward the empire that will one day seem eternal. The morning sun warms the streets, and you wander through neighborhoods where tension and excitement mix like the scents of baking bread and smoke. Rome is thriving, but not without problems. Wealth is concentrated among the patricians, while plebeians struggle to feed their families. Grain shortages make the air heavy with the murmurs of discontent. You watch mothers bargain for a loaf of bread, their hands trembling, and realize that power without provision is fragile. Odd detail. Public entertainment becomes a way to calm restless crowds. Small games, mock battles, and theatrical performances are staged to distract citizens from hunger or political frustration. You imagine children laughing as actors mimic generals and senators, exaggerating gestures to provoke laughter and, maybe, subtle critique. Scholars still argue whether these performances were purely entertainment or a clever political tool to maintain order. Mainstream historical fact. Rome's population grows rapidly during the Republic, leading to urban crowding and social unrest. Plebeians organize strikes, demand tribunes, and occasionally retreat to the Sacred Mount, forcing concessions from the elite. This constant negotiation between classes defines the city's politics for centuries. You wander down a crowded street where merchants shout over each other, selling fish, olives, pottery, and textiles. The noise is overwhelming, but there's an energy here you can't ignore. This is Rome alive, messy, and relentless. You notice graffiti scratched into walls, slogans, jokes, even threats. Oddly charming, you think, that human nature hasn't changed much in 2 millennia. Soldiers march through the forum on their way to skirmishes along distant frontiers. Some stumble, weighed down by poorly balanced packs, while veterans stride confidently, shields glinting in the sun. You overhear one mutter, "Another hill, another tribe," and you smile at the universality of fatigue and endurance. Every skirmish, no matter how small, teaches Rome discipline and endurance. The city's politics simmer alongside this unrest. Tribunes veto laws, senators argue, and plebeians protest. A popular tribune calls for land redistribution, his voice carrying through the forum. Citizens gather, some cheering, others shouting dissent. You note that the Republic thrives on debate and chaos alike. The cacophony of voices is a survival mechanism as much as a form of government. Odd, quirky moment. A wealthy patrician, trying to impress a crowd, falls into a fountain while gesturing dramatically during a speech. Laughter erupts, bridging class lines momentarily, a reminder that human nature transcends wealth and status. Meanwhile, Rome's military campaigns extend across Italy. You follow a group of soldiers preparing to march against the Samnites. They sharpen swords, strap on sandals, and adjust their armor. You see a young recruit nervously fumbling with his shield, while a seasoned veteran pats him on the shoulder, muttering, "You'll survive, maybe." You grin at the understated humor. It's grim, yet oddly comforting. Scholars still argue whether Rome's military discipline or strategic alliances were the key to dominance, but standing here, you sense it's both. Soldiers train, citizens negotiate, and rulers adapt, creating a system resilient enough to endure decades of conflict. Night falls and the city quiets, though distant fires flicker where markets close and soldiers return from skirmishes. Children play with sticks and pebbles, mimicking the soldiers they admire. The streets are chaotic, yet strangely peaceful, a rhythm of life that will define Rome for generations. You sit by the Tiber, letting the sound of flowing water soothe you. Even amid riots, campaigns, and political upheaval, there's a calm in knowing that Rome's energy is relentless, its ambition unbroken. The morning fog clings to the Tiber as you wander along its muddy banks, watching early fishermen haul nets and children splash in shallow pools. Rome's streets are quieter than usual. Tension hums beneath the surface. Today is different. Whispers speak of one man who will soon change everything. Julius Caesar is still decades away, but the city feels the stirrings of ambition that will eventually lead to dictatorship. For now, it's the seeds of power, sown in subtle acts, alliances, and rivalries. Odd detail, senators often hold informal meetings in dark alleyways or behind fountains to discuss strategies, away from the public eye. You peek through a narrow passage and see shadowed figures exchanging coins, gestures, and knowing glances. Scholars still argue whether these private councils were a sign of cunning diplomacy or corruption, but you can feel the intrigue buzzing in the air. Mainstream historical fact. As Rome expands, internal politics become increasingly complex. Ambitious leaders vie for influence, alliances shift, and the republic's checks and balances are constantly tested. These struggles set the stage for Caesar's rise and the eventual transition to empire. You wander through the Forum again, noting the architecture evolving with Rome's growing wealth. Marble begins to replace wood in public buildings, and statues of gods, heroes, and senators are erected to remind citizens of their heritage. Yet life remains chaotic. Street vendors call out, children dart between stalls, and dogs roam freely, sniffing for scraps. Oddly charming, this chaos reflects the Republic's vitality. In the countryside, soldiers march in strict formations, practicing maneuvers and adjusting to new tactics learned from enemies. You notice young recruits sweating, shields slipping, and weapons clanging, an almost musical rhythm. This constant preparation isn't glamorous, but it's essential. Rome's victories, after all, will hinge on discipline and persistence. Odd, quirky moment, a soldier drops his helmet mid-march, chasing it across the training field while his comrades laugh. Discipline is serious, but humor keeps the morale alive. You smile imagining centuries later historians dissecting such anecdotes for insight into Roman life. Meanwhile, the plebeians continue their quiet struggle. Some demand greater representation, others grumble over taxation or grain shortages. Their protests are peaceful yet persistent, a reminder that the Republic's strength comes not only from its armies, but also from its citizens' engagement. Scholars still debate how much these early disputes shaped Roman governance, but watching the dynamic unfold, you sense it is profound. You stroll through a temple dedicated to Jupiter, where priests chant and wave incense. Offerings of grain, wine, and small animals are laid carefully on the altar. Religion is intertwined with politics. Both serve to legitimize authority. You notice young children watching in awe, absorbing the rituals, and you realize that these customs, repeated for generations, will anchor Rome's identity. As evening approaches, the streets hum with activity. Merchants closing stalls, soldiers returning to barracks, and citizens gathering in small groups to discuss daily grievances. You sense a rhythm forming, a balance between chaos and order that is uniquely Roman. Every act of governance, every skirmish on the frontier, and every personal ambition contributes to a complex system that will endure centuries. Finally, night descends. You sit on a low hill overlooking the city, the Tiber glimmering faintly under the moonlight. Fires flicker in homes and temples, shadows dancing across the stone and mud. Rome is no longer a fragile village, nor is it yet an empire. It is a republic, vibrant, restless, and endlessly ambitious. You breathe in the cool night air, feeling the pulse of history beneath your feet, knowing that the story of Rome's rise is only beginning. You wake to the first rays of sunlight glinting off newly paved streets. The city feels transformed, more permanent than the mud and thatch settlements of centuries past. Rome is no longer merely surviving, it is asserting itself. Marble temples gleam in the early light, and statues of gods and heroes stare down from their pedestals, reminding everyone who walks the streets of ambition, power, and legacy. Odd detail. Augustus, though centuries away, is already whispered about in these future tales as the man who will finally bring order to the chaos you see unfolding. For now, the city's rulers focus on consolidating power, building infrastructure, and managing an increasingly complex population. Scholars still argue how much Rome's early urban planning influenced its eventual expansion, but the roads, aqueducts, and forums are clearly laying the groundwork for greatness. Mainstream historical fact. Augustus, the first emperor, will later transform Rome from republic to empire, establishing a period known as the Pax Romana, a time of relative peace, stability, and prosperity. But today, the seeds of this transformation are only beginning to sprout, planted in the messy, vibrant life of the city. You wander through the Forum, which has become the beating heart of Rome. Senators debate endlessly, their voices rising over the hum of merchants, soldiers, and plebeians. Every decision, every argument, every veto shapes the trajectory of the Republic. Odd quirky moment. A young boy imitates a senator's speech, pointing dramatically at the sky, only to trip over a stone. The crowd laughs, and even the serious senators can't hide a smile. In the countryside, legions train relentlessly. You watch soldiers march in perfect formation, shields interlocking, spears poised. The discipline is strict, almost theatrical, yet necessary for the campaigns that stretch Rome's influence across Italy and beyond. Odd detail. Some recruits are given rudimentary maps and tasked with navigating dense forests or rivers, preparing them for future battles in unfamiliar territories. Back in the city, grain shortages still cause murmurs of discontent. The plebeians demand fair distribution, their voices echoing through narrow streets. You notice small groups gathering on hills or near fountains, plotting how to ensure their needs are met. Scholars still argue how much these early disputes influenced Roman law and governance, but the impact is tangible. Tribunes wield power, and the people are learning that unity, protest, and negotiation can alter the course of their city. You pause at a small temple dedicated to Mars, watching priests wave incense and chant prayers for victory and protection. Religion and politics are intertwined here, each validating the other. Children peek through cracks in the walls, absorbing the ritualistic gestures, unaware that centuries later historians will study every detail for insight into Rome's psyche. Odd, quirky moment. A drunken merchant stumbles into the temple courtyard, spilling wine over sacred stones. The priests sigh, mutter under their breath, and continue. Rome is formal, ambitious, yet oddly human, full of foibles that make its story endlessly engaging. Evening descends, and the streets buzz with commerce and chatter. Soldiers return from training, merchants close shops, and families settle in for the night. The Tiber glows faintly in the moonlight, mirroring the stars above. Rome is evolving, restless and vibrant. You lean back against a stone wall, letting the rhythm of the city soothe you, aware that the Republic is building towards something monumental. A city, a culture, an empire that will leave an indelible mark on history. The morning sun spills golden light across the Colosseum's distant outline, not yet completed, but already a place where Romans gathered to witness spectacle, sport, and ritual. You wander among the citizens, feeling the excitement in the air. Rome is alive with leisure, ambition, and a growing appetite for entertainment. The streets echo with laughter, chatter, and the occasional shout from a market dispute. Odd detail. Gladiatorial games are beginning as small-scale displays, often honoring the dead or celebrating minor victories. You watch two men spar on a wooden platform, sticks clashing, while a crowd cheers. Scholars still argue whether these games were originally religious rituals or purely entertainment, but the excitement is unmistakable. You notice children imitating the combatants, their laughter ringing across the open space. Mainstream historical fact, the Colosseum itself will not be completed until centuries later under Emperor Vespasian. But the tradition of games, munera, begins during the Republic. These spectacles serve multiple purposes, honoring the dead, entertaining the masses, and displaying the power of the elite who sponsor them. As you stroll through the forum, senators and tribunes engage in heated debate. Laws concerning trade, land, and military campaigns are argued with passion, occasionally interrupted by shouts from citizens pressing their concerns. Odd, quirky moment. A stray dog wanders into the debate, earning chuckles and a few thrown stones from frustrated officials. Rome is a city of contradictions. Order and chaos coexist, sometimes within a single sentence. You wander down narrow alleys where artisans hammer bronze, potters shape clay, and merchants haggle. The smell of smoke and bread mingle, creating an oddly comforting aroma. Citizens negotiate tirelessly, a rhythm of give and take that mirrors the political negotiations in the forum. Scholars still argue whether Rome's cultural and commercial vibrancy directly fueled its military expansion. But walking these streets, you feel the energy firsthand. In the countryside, soldiers train under the fading sun. You watch recruits stumble over uneven terrain, their shields clanking, swords swaying. Odd detail. Some recruits decorate their armor with symbols or charms, hoping to ward off misfortune in upcoming campaigns. Humor and superstition coexist with strict discipline, shaping the resilience of Rome's legions. The city hums with trade and activity. Grain ships arrive from distant territories, wine flows into amphorae, and markets bustle with the exchange of goods, gossip, and coins. The plebeians push for fairness in distribution, occasionally clashing with officials, while senators lecture on duty, tradition, and the sanctity of Roman law. Oddly, this constant friction doesn't weaken the Republic, it sharpens it, teaching the city to adapt and endure. As twilight descends, fires flicker along the streets, casting long shadows on stone and mud. You find a quiet spot near a fountain and watch reflections dance on the water. Children toss pebbles, imitating soldiers. Merchants finish counting coins. Priests chant prayers for protection and prosperity. Rome is alive, chaotic, yet undeniably beautiful. A city of ambition, discipline, and spectacle. The day fades into night. You lean back against the stone, feeling the pulse of Rome's energy, the excitement of its games, the tension of its politics, and the rhythm of its streets. The Republic has grown stronger, more confident, and more complex. It is a city that never truly sleeps, a living organism that will one day become an empire.
Dawn breaks slowly over Rome, and the city hums with the quiet tension of preparation. Soldiers sharpen swords, merchants arrange goods, and citizens hustle through the streets, each action a small thread in the Republic's intricate tapestry. You wander past the Forum, where tribunes and senators meet, their voices a constant mixture of debate and negotiation. The air is thick with anticipation, as if the city itself senses the weight of the decisions being made. Odd detail, Roman political meetings often involve elaborate gestures, from hand-waving to dramatic pauses, almost theatrical in their delivery. You see a senator dramatically pound his staff on the ground, silencing the crowd for a moment. Scholars still argue whether these theatrics were sincere or performative, but they certainly influence the mood and outcome of debates. Mainstream historical fact: during this period, Rome's political institutions continue to evolve. Consuls, tribunes, and the Senate negotiate constantly, balancing military expansion, domestic stability, and citizen rights. This dynamic system, though chaotic, provides the Republic with a remarkable resilience. You wander toward the city gates, where soldiers prepare for a march to a neighboring territory. Shields gleam in the morning sun, and spears sway rhythmically. Odd, quirky moment. One soldier's helmet slips down over his eyes mid-step, causing him to trip and stumble into a comrade. Laughter breaks out, lightening the tension before the march begins. The countryside surrounding Rome is dotted with small villages and farms. You notice farmers tending their fields, preparing crops that will feed both city and army. Grain, olives, and wine flow toward the city, a constant reminder that Rome's strength is as much agricultural as it is martial. Scholars still debate how much food supply influenced military strategy, but the connection is undeniable. Back in the city, the plebeians continue to negotiate power. Small protests ripple through the streets, some peaceful, others more forceful. Tribunes intervene when necessary, their presence a check against potential abuses by the patricians. Odd detail, sometimes these disputes escalate to dramatic public spectacles, where speeches are shouted, gestures exaggerated, and insults fly freely. The chaos is almost performative, yet it reinforces the Republic's system of accountability. You wander near the river, watching ferries carrying goods and people across the Tiber. Children splash in shallow pools along the banks, imitating the movements of soldiers or traders. You notice merchants counting coins, scribes etching records into tablets, and priests performing morning rituals, all simultaneously in overlapping rhythms that formed the heartbeat of the city. As evening approaches, a minor skirmish breaks out at a distant border. Soldiers return, dusty and tired, yet their camaraderie is evident. They recount stories of narrow escapes, clever maneuvers, and occasional humor that keeps morale alive. Odd, quirky moment. One soldier recounts how he slipped in mud and accidentally toppled an enemy spear, earning unintended victory. The laughter spreads quickly,
blending relief with pride. Night falls, and you settle on a hill overlooking the city. Fires flicker in homes and temples, reflecting the stars above. Rome is vibrant, restless, and endlessly ambitious. Each debate, skirmish, and ritual contributes to a city learning to govern, to fight, and to endure. The Republic is alive, pulsing with energy, and you sense that its story, though centuries old, is only growing richer and more intricate.
The first light of dawn stretches across Rome, illuminating rooftops, streets, and the Tiber winding like a silver ribbon. You wander through the bustling markets, hearing the calls of vendors hawking olives, bread, and pottery. Citizens hurry past, some carrying goods, others gossiping about political intrigues or recent skirmishes. Rome is alive, a vibrant organism, each part contributing to the strength and rhythm of the Republic. Odd detail, merchants often whisper rumors into the ears of passing citizens, knowing news travels faster than coins. Scholars still argue how much these informal networks influenced public opinion and political outcomes, but standing here, you can sense their subtle power. Mainstream historical fact: Rome's economy is becoming increasingly complex. Trade routes stretch across the Italian peninsula, integrating distant communities and resources into the city's network. Taxes, tariffs, and tribute are carefully monitored, balancing wealth, public welfare, and military funding. You wander to the Forum, where senators gather in heated discussion. One proposes expanding the Republic's influence into nearby territories, while another argues for caution, citing supply lines and potential rebellions. The plebeians, watching and whispering among themselves, feel the tension of these decisions. Odd, quirky moment: a young boy, perhaps 5 or 6, mimics the gestures of a senator, waving his stick wildly and earning chuckles from nearby adults. Rome's political theater reaches even the youngest eyes. Outside the city, soldiers train relentlessly. Shields glint, spears sway, and commands echo across fields. New tactics are practiced, borrowed from enemies and adapted with ingenuity. Odd detail: some recruits practice marching blindfolded, trusting their comrades' guidance, a lesson in teamwork, trust, and improvisation. Scholars still debate how effective these drills were, but they undeniably contribute to the resilience of Roman legions. You wander past a small temple dedicated to Jupiter, where priests chant prayers for protection and victory. Offerings of grain, wine, and small animals are arranged carefully. Religion and politics intertwine, each validating the other. Odd, quirky moment: a goose strays into the temple courtyard, honking and flapping wildly, earning laughter from the crowd and mild annoyance from priests. Humanity persists, even amidst formality. Back in the city, plebeians continue to assert influence. Tribunes intervene in disputes, vetoing unfair proposals and ensuring citizens' voices are heard. Negotiation, compromise, and public spectacle become central to Roman governance. You notice families discussing policy around hearths, merchants debating trade in taverns, and children mimicking debates with sticks and stones. The Republic thrives not only through law and army, but through daily engagement. As evening falls, soldiers return from a minor skirmish at a neighboring border. Dust coats their tunics, sweat glistens on faces, yet their spirits remain resilient. Odd, quirky moment: one veteran recounts slipping in mud and accidentally taking out an enemy soldier, drawing laughter from comrades. Rome's victories are earned through skill, persistence, and occasional serendipity. Night descends, the city quiets, and you sit overlooking the Tiber. Fires flicker in homes, casting shadows across walls and streets. Rome is vibrant, complex, and alive. Every debate, skirmish, and ritual contributes to the Republic's growth. You feel the pulse of a city learning to govern, fight, and endure. A city on the cusp of greatness. The morning air is cool as you wander through narrow Roman streets, the scent of baking bread mingling with smoke from hearths. People move with purpose, merchants setting up stalls, children darting between legs, and soldiers preparing for another day of duty. Yet, in hushed corners and dimly lit homes, a different kind of gathering is taking shape. The first whispers of Christianity. Odd detail. You notice small groups meeting in cramped rooms, speaking softly of a single God rather than the many deities Rome honors. The rituals are simple, sharing bread, wine, and words of comfort. Scholars still argue whether these meetings were seen at first as harmless curiosity or as dangerous dissent, but here the atmosphere feels both secretive and quietly defiant. Mainstream historical fact? Christianity begins as a tiny sect within Judea, spreading slowly through personal connections, trade routes, and Roman soldiers who carry stories across provinces. It doesn't dominate yet, but its message resonates with the poor, the enslaved, and those disillusioned with Rome's traditional pantheon. You wander through the Forum, where grand temples tower, dedicated to Jupiter, Mars, and Venus. Priests chant, incense wafts, and sacrifices are made. To the majority, Rome's gods feel eternal and unshakable. But then you overhear whispers. A new faith is stirring. Odd, quirky moment. A child points at a statue of Jupiter and mutters, "He looks bored," drawing laughter from passing citizens. Even reverence cannot escape humor. In the countryside, you watch a patrol of soldiers return dusty from the provinces. Some carry strange trinkets, amulets, scrolls, and stories of foreign lands. These small cultural exchanges weave into the tapestry of Rome. Odd detail, one soldier jokes about being offered strange bread and wine at a gathering, not realizing he has brushed against early Christian ritual. Back in the city, tension brews. Some Romans dismiss the new faith as irrelevant, while others grow uneasy. Rumors spread quickly, sometimes exaggerating practices, sometimes inventing them. Scholars still argue whether early Christians were persecuted systematically or sporadically, but standing here, you sense suspicion simmering beneath the surface. You pause at a bustling market, watching merchants sell figs, grain, and olive oil. Voices overlap, coins clink, and arguments flare. A street performer imitates a senator, waving arms dramatically while children giggle. Rome is vibrant, alive, and noisy. But beneath the laughter and trade lies an undercurrent of change, something subtle, yet destined to reshape the city's identity. Evening falls, and you wander toward the Tiber, where torches reflect on the water. Groups of Christians gather discreetly in shadowed homes nearby, their songs soft and fragile against the city's roar. In contrast, larger crowds cheer at the theater, watching comedies and tragedies that celebrate Rome's traditional gods. The city seems unaware of the profound transformation slowly taking root in its margins. Night deepens, fires flicker, stars emerge, and Rome hums with the duality of tradition and change. You lean against a stone wall, hearing laughter from taverns on one side and faint hymns from a hidden home on the other. The Republic, and soon the Empire, is vast and adaptable. But you sense this whisper, this fragile new faith, will someday echo louder than the chants of Jupiter himself. The morning haze settles over Rome like a curtain, and you drift through streets that feel both familiar and subtly strained. Markets bustle, children laugh, senators argue, but there's an undercurrent of division, as though the city itself is being tugged in two directions. You soon realize why. The empire is splitting, its vastness too heavy for a single crown to carry. Odd detail, In taverns, you overhear travelers debating whether Rome is still truly one city, one people. A merchant swears trade feels different in the east than in the west, while another insists Rome is Rome, no matter the horizon. Scholars still argue whether the division into east and west was inevitable or a desperate bandage, but to you, it feels like a slow unraveling. Mainstream historical fact: in the late 3rd and early 4th century CE, emperors like Diocletian and Constantine reorganized Rome, dividing it into western and eastern halves for administration. The Western Empire will weaken under constant invasions, while the Eastern Empire, later called Byzantium, endures for centuries. You stroll into the Forum, noticing new statues and banners, each side of the empire trying to display strength. Senators give fiery speeches about unity, but their words feel hollow. Odd, quirky moment, a hawker interrupts a senator's dramatic pause by shouting about fresh figs for sale, and the crowd laughs nervously. Even in times of crisis, daily life barges in. Farther out, at the borders, soldiers prepare defenses against barbarian incursions. Shields gleam, swords are polished, and commanders bark orders. Yet there's unease. The frontiers are stretched thin, too many enemies pressing at once. Odd detail: some legions are staffed with mercenaries from tribes Rome once fought. You hear one veteran mutter, "Strange days when yesterday's foe guards today's wall." Back in the city, Christianity continues to spread. Temples stand tall, but churches quietly multiply, drawing more citizens into their orbit. Scholars still argue whether Constantine's conversion was a genuine act of faith or a political calculation, but the effect is undeniable. The old gods begin to fade, their statues gathering dust in forgotten corners. At dusk, you wander to the Tiber and notice smaller gatherings, families speaking in hushed tones, merchants plotting safer routes, priests whispering prayers. The atmosphere feels uncertain, fragile, as though Rome itself is holding its breath. Odd, quirky moment, a group of children play war by dividing into east and west, throwing figs instead of stones, their laughter echoing across the cobblestones. Night falls, and you sit on a hill overlooking the divided city. Fires glow across neighborhoods, flickering like stars scattered unevenly across the earth. You feel the weight of history pressing down. Rome is still powerful, still proud, but cracks are widening. The empire's story is shifting, and you sense the ending is nearer than anyone dares admit. The sun rises over Rome with a pale, tired light, and as you wander through the streets, you notice a heaviness in the air. The empire feels frayed at the edges. Its grandeur still visible in the marble arches and sprawling forums, but its strength dimmed, its voice less certain. You sense that Rome, once invincible, now carries the weight of its own decline. Mainstream historical fact: in 476 CE, the Western Roman Empire collapses when the last emperor, Romulus Augustulus, is deposed by the Germanic leader Odoacer. It's less a dramatic fall and more a slow fading, a surrender to pressures both external and internal. The Eastern Roman Empire, however, survives as Byzantium for nearly 1,000 more years. You drift along the crumbling walls of the city, where weeds push between stones. Soldiers once drilled here in perfect order, but now you see fewer shields, fewer polished helmets. Odd detail: a lone guard naps against the wall, his spear propped beside him, a stray cat curling up at his feet as if it's the true guardian of Rome. Inside the city, the markets still operate, though with less abundance. Merchants barter loudly, trying to hide their worry. Imported goods are rarer, coins less valuable. Odd, quirky moment:
A baker stamps "best bread in Rome" on loaves that are smaller than ever, and customers laugh bitterly, but buy them anyway. Christian churches grow more prominent, their bells cutting through the quiet of fading temples. The once mighty statues of Jupiter and Mars stand neglected, pigeons nesting in their stone folds. Scholars still argue whether the empire's decline was accelerated by Christianity's rise, or whether it simply provided solace during collapse. You sense it's not either or. Rome is being reshaped, not simply destroyed. Beyond the city, barbarian tribes settle in former Roman lands. What were once Rome's enemies now live in its villas, till its fields, and govern its towns. The empire's identity blurs, less Roman, more a patchwork of cultures. You pass a group of children playing, their Latin mixed with Germanic words, laughing as though they've invented a new language for a new world. Night comes quietly, as if even the heavens mourn the fading empire. Torches flicker weakly in the forum, their glow barely illuminating cracked marble and broken columns. You sit on the steps of an abandoned temple, listening to the wind whistle through arches that once echoed with triumphal parades. Odd detail. A faded carving of a victorious general is now scratched over with graffiti of a fish, the symbol of Christianity. The new quietly replaces the old. As you lean back, you feel the story of Rome settle around you. Not a sudden crash, but a slow unraveling. Not an end, but a transformation. The eternal city is changing, its glory dimmed but not extinguished. You close your eyes, and the hum of the ancient city fades into something softer, calmer. The empire's march is over, but the echoes linger, timeless as the stars above.
Now let your mind drift from the cracked stones and fading fires. Imagine yourself lying down in a quiet Roman villa, its walls cool, its windows open to the night. Outside, crickets sing softly, and a warm breeze carries the scent of olive groves. The noise of empire, the marching soldiers, the shouting senators, the clang of markets melts away into silence. History, after all, is a series of stories, and tonight you've walked through one of the longest and grandest of them all. Rome rose, conquered, dazzled, divided, and declined. But for you, it's just a gentle tale, a thread of time woven into dreams. Your breathing slows as the past slips into the distance. The fires burn out, the voices fade, and all that remains is calm. You are safe, you are still, and the world is quiet. Sweet dreams.